Now, there you are.
Oh my goodness. Here we are with a live E5 segment. That was a great interview by whoever did that interview right before this.
It's like he was in two places at once.
Yeah.
Almost.
That Joe
wow.
Torado, though, he's
Yeah.
something else.
Mhm.
Really, I love what they're doing over at Latinx and Gaming. So shout out to them. They have their Connexion job fair happening next week, I believe, or this month. So we got together here. We did a Indelicious indie panel earlier in E5 where we focused on indie game development. But another segment of gaming that I think didn't really get a lot of love at E3, doesn't really normally get much love at E3 or CES, is virtual reality. Something we care about at Shacknews a lot.
Yes.
A virtual reality game won our Game of the Year last year. You may have heard of it. It's a little game called Half-Life Alyx. So we have gotten some folks here, kind of from all over the VR space, artists, devs, and journalists, to come here to chat with us. So let's just, I'll go based on where we are on the screen. So we got the co-founder of one of my favorite websites in VR, Road to VR. We got Ben Lang here. Hey, Ben.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yes, really appreciate you coming here. We have David and me here, but everyone knows who we are. Looking like he's making a very low altitude mission in Ace Combat. We have Steve Bowler piping in from some aircraft somewhere.
Yep,
Chicago?
I'm just I'm flying over Lake Michigan right now. So.
Oh, okay. And then we have, I want to get this right. You're an artist at XR, Rosie Summers, but you're also known just for doing awesome stuff in Tilt Brush and all sorts of cool stuff, right?
Yeah, that's me.
So, welcome all of you for stopping by for this chat. Like I said, VR wasn't very present this week at E3, and obviously Sony wasn't at E3 either, and they're one of the biggest players in VR. Oculus wasn't at E3, and they're one of the other biggest players in VR. And then obviously Shacknews, one of the biggest players in VR. We couldn't resist having a conversation about this. And the topic is the state of VR in 2021. Things have changed a lot from when there was, a DK2 and not really a whole lot there software-wise to now. Facebook acquired Oculus, Facebook acquired Beat Saber, Facebook acquired, I don't know, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Google acquired the Alchemy Labs. So there's been a lot of consolidation in the space, and it seems like the only people left in VR are the ones who actually care about it now. That hot VC money kind of came and went. So I wanted to talk about where VR was like today, relative to where it's been and where folks think it's going. So yeah, let's just start with one of our first topics. We've seen success with Half-Life last year, and Beat Saber obviously is hugely popular. Pistol Whip is another really good VR game. In 2021, I guess we'll start with Ben. What type of games do you think, or experiences even, do you think are needed for the platform to keep growing right now?
It's a good question, and I think probably most people paying attention to this space will know where I'm going to start off with this, which is like Half-Life Alyx, right? So released last year, one of the best rated games on all of Steam, every game, not just VR. This is the kind of game that I think people want to be growing to further the adoption of VR. We saw what it did for numbers. It's really made a big impact on growing the number of people actively using VR on Steam, and even elsewhere. Even if you were not part of the Steam ecosystem, if you had a headset that could plug in there, like you were probably playing Alyx, right? One of the biggest, most impactful single games out there. You can't discount games like Beat Saber, though, which are heavily played, but maybe not as definitely plenty talked about, but maybe not quite as memorable of an experience. I think people really want, at least among us gamers, these really rich, deep worlds like Half-Life Alyx that are highly interactive, tell a story, and kind of take us on an adventure. There's a lot of arcade games out there, and I think VR is a bit in this arcade phase, which is not to say that that's not important. I think it actually really is, right? Like, we wouldn't have the massive games that we have today if gaming didn't have an arcade phase where some of these little mechanics and just the little bits and pieces that are now thousands of them are in an individual game. That stuff has to be figured out, and the arcade games are helping us do that, right? Beat Saber shows how it's fun to cut blocks. There's a game I love called Until You Fall, which shows some really cool sword combat. Eventually, I think that these things are going to come together into more comprehensive, experiences like Alex. But it's just very difficult. And the design is still maturing, and really the funding is a huge problem. Like, if it wasn't Valve making Alex, that game wouldn't exist. If they didn't, like, I interviewed them, they were like, we know we're not doing this because we think it's the most profitable thing that we could do. We wouldn't make a game in VR if we were trying to make the most money we could make. But we think that this is an awesome opportunity as game developers, and like, we want to see VR grow. So that is, the reason that game has existed. It costs a lot to make, and so it's kind of a bummer that people maybe don't quite understand how difficult it is to find the resources to make a game like that. But we do need more, and we will get there. But the kind of market needs to find its way there.
Yeah, and I don't know if either Rosie or Steve want to chime in with just what do you think, like, new experiences, maybe outside of the Half-Life universe, that you think VR kind of needs right now? Or...
You want to
No.
go, Rosie?
Should I go?
I have an opinion,
Yeah.
but I'll wait.
Okay. Well, yeah, I completely agree with Ben with the whole aspect of there being a need for a game that's been worked on for multiple years to really get to this high standard of narrative-driven, immersive worlds. And yeah, there really needs to be a game like that. I think that would just have the popularity that Alex would. But the issue right now is that the studios are getting funding for like a game which probably has the turnover for about a year, or even like some cases less, which is nothing really for a game, which means we're getting these games which don't have that much content, which are just they end up being quite arcadey because of the fact that there needs to be a fast turnaround with funding, because it's pretty hard at the minute with indie studios and VR and stuff like that. So yeah, that's what I think we need, really, just some more time to work on some more narrative driven, jam packed full of content games, really. More zombie shooters.
And more zombie shooters. Okay,
Yeah.
well, I'm in.
Yeah.
I'm joking, of course.
It's wild to me that the market is, I don't want to say maturing. It's definitely congealing, and it's almost gentrifying is the wrong word. It's all like everybody's treating it like, well, it has to be a console, and it has to be about gun games, sword games, stabby games, or zombie games, right? Like, and as somebody who made a game, that was a commercial success when it first came out, with the guns in it that you shot dinosaurs, I'm really tired of it. Like, and I disagree with some folks out there who are like, but that's what's moving the market. I'm like, no, this is like the tail wagging the dog market right now, that the money is only being thrown at making gun titles. Look who Oculus just bought out, right? It's the One Day Studio, whatever the heck they're called, the guys who make the big
Population One, yeah.
Population One, that's
VR
it. The
Big
Fortnite and
box.
VR company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like Google pulling out was kind of soul crushing, because like we lost the big corporate money push behind Tilt Brush. Is it great that it's open source now? Yes. But like none of that stuff's being updated anymore. Where are the creative apps, right? Like, like Alchemy proved that probably the most successful interactions in VR is fun, delightful, real world, grabbing stuff and sticking it together and seeing what happens, right? And like nobody's chasing that. And like nobody else is like doubling and tripling down on it. Even in my own Twitter feed that's, curated around a lot of VR content, the stuff people get the most excited about are those hands-on Oculus touch demos where the guy's got the crowbar and he's like picking stuff up with the hook and the crowbar, and his fingers are wrapping and knurling around the rod properly, right? And he's like playing the piano, and he's doing weird stuff where he like flips his finger up and he's writing on the wall with it, and showing all of these imaginative, really cool, innovative things that you can do with VR. And yet all we get and all we see is funding for another gun game. And I mean, I'm somebody who enjoys shooting real world guns. I don't own any, but like, I have nothing against it. It's just, that's all there is. And I like what we're going to see is a market that now is going to, again, keep saying, well, all we can, like, we have to make more of this because that's what sells. And it's like, that's the only thing you're putting on the market to test, right? It's definitely a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I would love to see more creative titles. Where's the Photoshop of VR? Where is it?
Yeah.
Who has it?
Or
right?
like, going back to Alex real quick, my favorite parts of that game weren't the gunplay. It was the problem solving, the puzzles that you saw in that. I really like solving puzzles in VR. I think that you can do things with the puzzle genre in VR that you can't in a flat screen experience.
Yep.
And I think that's an example of one genre, Steve, that is like, I know there's some games that do it, but it's still kind of underserved. And then, yeah, Beat Saber was this lightning in a bottle, right? Because it's like, I know there's a ton of clones that are following it now, but that's like a genre of VR games now, is music based, slash and dash or shoot the thing. There have been like 10 games since Beat Saber that do that, and it speaks to what you're saying, that it maybe not the devs, but the VCs are very unimaginative in this space.
Yeah,
and
they are certainly risk averse, right?
Yeah.
The term is risk averse. That like they don't want to take a risk. They only want to put money in what they know will sell. And so you see this self-fulfilling cycle of that's where the money's going. So
it just seems dumb, because if you're a VC and you're really only focused on profit motive, like, why are you even bothering in VR? The addressable market's so much smaller than making a mobile game or making a Switch game or something.
Yeah,
like,
where's
so
the
if that's
scale?
all you really, if that's all you really cared about, then it seems like they should get out. I was hoping that at this point, the only VCs left in this industry would be the ones who actually care, or the only entities left in this industry would be the ones who care. And like, as much as I talk smack about Facebook, they clearly don't care about making money in VR. And to Ben's point, Valve doesn't really care about making money in VR either. They're just trying to push the medium forward, because I think people who care about VR realize that there is a future in society for this platform, and that those early adopters and the early movers are going to be here to stay.
Yeah.
We've been playing a lot of Game Builder Garage on Switch this week, which is Nintendo's new game where you build games for other people to play. And the whole time I would, you do this by connecting objects to other objects to create functionality. And the whole time I was doing that, I couldn't help thinking, how fun would this be in VR, where you could essentially build your own VR playgrounds for other people to play, because it would address that problem as well. If you're seeing certain genres or types of experience not being served, it would be great to have a VR app that lets you build your own and put them out there, maybe to get some ideas brewing with other developers, maybe large ones like Valve, maybe smaller indie ones. But it seems like it might be a case where, players might need an app to kind of build these experiences themselves.
Sounds like dreams.
Yeah, I was gonna say there are a few places where that is happening, and it's really promising. So Dreams, Rec Room, even Horizon, which is not out yet, but it's upcoming. Those all have significant sort of user-generated components to them, to the point that Rec Room now actually has turned itself into an ecosystem, an actual like marketplace. So in the game, players can say, hey, I want to build something, and they can script something up or create an environment or just create a model and an asset for other people. Other people can pay in-game money to the developer or to the creator, and the creator can actually cash that out and get real money paid back from the developer of Rec Room. It's very interesting that that's happening in such a significant way that the developers of Rec Room said they saw the user-generated content happening, and then said, hey, we can find a way to help create synergy where creators can continue to do this in an even bigger and better way. It wasn't like they just set off and said, hey, we're going to have some, I don't know, crypto, everyone's going to own the assets, kind of like you see all the time kind of pitch on these platforms. It was actually just they noticed our creators in the game really putting a lot of time into this. And so now there's that pretty direct loop. So it's like these little micro experiments where people like you can go in there and play, something that looks like a level of some game that you've played before, but you're doing it in VR and you're doing it with friends. And if they see that that's working and people want to pay their in-game money to do that, the creator can say, okay, I'm going to build it better next time. And I think eventually that will help, sort of like this little evolution that'll help some of these ideas that maybe are not getting the love from the sort of traditional funding sources will kind of help them build up in this grassroots way. And I think that's kind of a lot of where VR is right now, right? The hardware is there, kind of the capabilities are there. Now it's just a matter of finding out how do you serve the people who want these experiences, and also how do you grow it? And I guess there's maybe not one single way to do that. But the good news is we know that it has been growing at a pretty good rate in the last couple of years.
It appears that Steve is now in a early 90s shooter or Star Fox.
I've decided we're going to the Mesa. It's Tron time now. So
that's Tron. Okay, got you. Ben, you brought up monetization in VR and just the need to have an ecosystem. I kind of want to bring it back to just the concept of funding for these projects. I know Steve, everyone's kind of mentioned it. How different is it today than 2016 if you're trying to start a VR project? Is it materially different? Is the market like, I know a few years ago it really felt like the market for funding in VR dried up for a second. Is it back open? Is it the same players? I know like there's the VR fund out there. Like if you're a dev, you may be a small team and you need funding for a game, is it easier, harder than it was 5 years ago? Or how has it changed, I guess would be the question. I guess we'll start with Steve this time.
It's to answer is it easier or harder than it was in 2015 or 2016 as a small dev, I would say the word choice needs to be impossible. Okay. As a small developer, it's a weird place to be in because VR has matured to the point now where there are so many tools and there's so many headsets. There's so many ways to start working in VR as a developer. And Unreal's free now. You can just download it and start playing with it, right? Same with Unity, and Unity's got that new VR TK, and Unreal just released a brand new improved VR toolkit that's fantastic. Mm-hmm. I would have killed for these tools in 2016. We had to roll our own, right? And so in that regard, it's real easy to get started as a fan or as an indie developer and start making your own thing. As far as if you want to get paid while you make it, give up because it's not going to happen for you. And I hate to be soul crushing about it, but it's I have to be honest. And the reality of it is the money now in VR is exclusively for the large platform publishing deals. And that's it. And no one's ever shared numbers with me. I don't have actual numbers, but teams like Insomniac are getting millions of dollars from Oculus to make titles for Oculus, whereas indie developers can't even get, a check for $150,000 from Oculus. Mm-hmm. Unless you've already made it, right? Like when they bought Beat Saber was already huge. And VR Fund funded Beat Saber. VR Fund funded them, but they funded them back in 2016.
Yeah.
And so there's no VCs funding in VR right now. If there are, please shout from the mountaintops and prove me wrong.
Yeah.
Right? Angel investors have walked away. It's the money in VR is dead. You either had to have made it by now, or you have to have money, or you're already, in, the nest feathers of Oculus, right? That's it. That's where the money's at. And that's the only that's it. That's the market, money-wise. As far as getting investment, you could try to do a Kickstarter, and that would be suicide because Kickstarters are notoriously impossible. They're work unto themselves, right? Kickstarters run for 30 days, and you are not working on your project for 30 days. You are running your Kickstarter, and trying to run your campaign for 30 days. And it's like, anyway.
If I can chime in here, though I think Steve pretty accurately represented the general state of things. I think there are small opportunities to be found, and some people are taking advantage of those, and it's always great to see. Self-starter types, there's a handful of examples out there of people doing early access stuff that have built a community around their VR game and are really making it work. They're really making it happen. There's even some non-early access stuff. One that comes to mind is a game called Cubism. It's a very simple, straightforward game. It's kind of like 3D Tetris in VR. Just thoughtfully put together, one-man team. I believe he did it mostly sort of as a side hustle. But once he launched it, he started to see that it was performing, and he went full time on it and said, "This is enough that I can, kind of kick this off into my full time business and grow from there." So, although yes, the money is definitely difficult to come by if you want funding, there is at least some opportunity to sort of self-start if you can figure out how to have a small scope project that is appropriate for the size of the market. Otherwise, you're trying to go to Oculus. VC money is, VC money has never been really a traditional game dev source of funding. That was sort of VR hype mode where VCs said, hey, it's going to blow up. We went in on this opportunity. Really, publishers, right, have been the traditional funding source in many cases for gaming.
There's
it just seems specifically in VR that in 2015 and 16, it really was a feeding frenzy for VR or for VCs.
And the VC money is for studio funding. It's for seed series, A series funding for studios and startups. And that's why you saw it with VR. It wasn't that VR was a niche. It was that they fund companies at the seed and A stage. And so when you, I know that you don't see it, Ben, but I do, that I could list 3 studios, at least right now, I'm going to get the names wrong, that I know were funded with VC money, that they either came from a venture cap or they came from a video game corporation that's worth billions of dollars, it's essentially VC money. They're going to want a return on their investment. It's the same deal, right? And because they founded game studios, they got seed money. And so it does happen in video games quite a bit. When you see a new studio announce, we're forming a studio, and if it's not an indie studio of 4 people, if it's like somebody's got a big name as the head of the studio, I promise you they got some sort of venture funding, whether it was from a VC or whether it was from another source. It's still coming from you know what I mean? Like they're not self-funding it.
Gotcha, yeah, for sure. But so in VR in 2021, though, that VC is not really an option, right? Although, I get your point, in traditional gaming that may be happening. But yeah, so in 2021, it's kind of like Oculus. Hopefully it's going to be Sony again soon. But again, those are going to be the bigger deals. Not a lot of indie action happening there. And then there's kind of a handful of publishers out there that are actively dealing in VR now that seem to be handing out more deals as we go. So hopefully we're getting there, but there's definitely not as many opportunities as traditional game dev.
It's weird because I know how these dummies in VC think, and they all look at total addressable market. Right? That's like TAM is what they call it. And it's undeniable. There's more VR headsets in the world right now than there were 5 years ago. And there's more accounts attached to Steam who have VR headsets than ever before. PlayStation VR is, I would argue, a success. It's sold. They've actually disclosed how many units they've sold, which Oculus still hasn't done. Steam definitely hasn't done with the Valve Index. So it's weird to me that there is a larger addressable market than ever before, but it's not viewed as like a sexy investment in Silicon Valley anymore. Like that to me is very weird. But that VR as a platform, as like a broader ecosystem, is the biggest it's ever been. And at the same time, it's the power really seems to have consolidated to very few entities, which is troubling for me. Like as someone who I miss the days of Oculus Connect when you could walk out into the hallway, not on the first one, and there were just people with laptops on the ground showing you demos, like the homebrew feel
Yep.
It very much so feels like it's gone right now. And I know there's still people out there working, but they're not given that shine that they were before.
To just interject real quick, we've been talking pretty exclusively about the game space, and everything we've said is pretty true. Well, very true. However, it does come to mind that VR is starting to feel sort of hot again in VC land, just not in gaming. So we are seeing big, serious, $2, $5, $10, $25, $50 million deals going into companies pretty carefully, pretty exclusively building VR technologies. But this is in like medicine, it's in construction, it's in healthcare, right? So I think maybe VCs are they're not seeing the exponential growth trajectory right now in gaming, but they are saying, hey, this could be big technology outside of gaming, and we want to bet on that now.
Yeah, and then I want to piggyback on that. What I'm seeing from a lot of these mega cap corporations, that may not be in VR per se right now, is like a huge investment in AR, where Apple has been spending money on AR kit. They're working on something at Apple. If you believe their patents, if you believe their R&D expenses, like there's some kind of HMD or some AR experience they're working on. And they acquired a couple of VR companies. They acquired Next VR. They've acquired some stuff in the VR space. So you would think that maybe Apple has something to say there. Microsoft, going back to your point, Ben, about enterprise, HoloLens is very much so designed for the enterprise. And I feel like that's another example of that, like the Windows holographic demo they showed us a few years ago. It seems like everyone's kind of even though there's not a single AR headset worth half a damn, these $1 trillion companies are spending more on that space than they are VR. It just seems really weird to me that no one in that space wants to spend that money on VR right now. Like, why do so many enterprises think AR is the truth? And I'm gonna just kind of lob this in there too. Is it possible that there's like this bridge device between true AR and VR that's a VR headset with pass-through cameras that could serve as something like a bridge between these two platforms? Because it seems right now like Google, Apple, Microsoft are all focused on AR. Facebook has even said they're working on something in AR. Is it possible that there's like some sort of bridge convergence device before we see it splinter off again?
I'll quickly jump on the first half of that, because for me the answer is relatively clear, actually. Why they're investing so heavily in AR is because if you're really paying attention to the space, the most powerful people in the most powerful tech companies in the world believe that augmented reality is basically the future of the smartphone. And the smartphone is an insanely massive market. It's bigger than gaming. It's far bigger than VR. It's bigger than movies. It's humongous, right? So this transition from kind of smartphone to AR is potentially a time where companies, the power structure may change, the leaders may change. They see it as an opportunity, and that's why. So everybody wants a bite of that massive pie. And then why not VR? It's because everybody is not going to be walking around with VR headsets on in the same way that they do a smartphone in their pocket. But if AR is the future of the smartphone, people will, in the future at some point, probably all be walking around with some sleek AR glasses on their head, but it's not VR.
Okay. And that sleek form factor, is it something where we're talking point of view capture is more important than a translucent screen in front of you? Because we already are carrying screens in our pockets, right? So is it one of those things where we just need a better form of POV capture, and that could lend to like phones being like a mirror or like a screen that shows us an augmented reality on it? Do you think that's more likely to come out of an Apple than like an actual HMD?
Rosie, I've seen you kind of nod and shrug. I wondered.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking they're going the glasses direction. I really do, just because it is that AR does offer you that lens with the real world, which is quite often why I hate comparing AR and VR, because in my eyes they've always been so different. Because VR, you want to escape. AR, you just want to bring things into this reality, whereas with VR it can take you to a different reality. I just think they're so different that they cross over in the Venn diagram of virtual But yeah, they're very different to me. But the biggest thing that's most appealing about AR in my eyes is just how lightweight it is in comparison to VR. And it is more of a social experience. It's inclusive of everyone around you, which VR isn't. And that is also why it's also looked at as not appealing, because some people don't want to be on their own in the virtual world, unlike me. So yeah, it's purely the aspect of it being more like a smartphone, like Ben said. Like, it's something that is lightweight and we always have around us, and it can put adverts in front of your face 24/7. So
I don't know if any of the folks here have tried Magic Leap. Ben, have you tried out Magic Leap?
Yep.
It was unimpressive. The field of view was not great. The translucent
I think we've been
screen.
spoilt with VR though. That's why, with the field of view, suddenly to be given a tiny square which you can only see there, it's just like.
No, Rosie,
Yeah.
you're dead right, and that's why I'm like, what if, like, we could have the best of both worlds, a VR HMD with a great field of view and pass-through cameras, so that there is there's footage of the real world in front of you, and then high fidelity graphics that can be overlaid on top of that. That is kind of what I was suggesting with this convergence device. But it really seems, and I agree with your point, Ben, that the smartphone is very likely going to be the vector of AR in the future. And it makes sense for Apple and Google specifically to be super invested in that. They don't want to give up any of their market share. But yeah, Steve, go ahead.
And I just want to address your two things. Like, one, the pass-through device thing, I think it's a Hollywood fantasy, right? Like, the issue with it is that your eyeballs are not here and here, right? When you're wearing it on your face. That, relative to where you are, is here and here.
Yeah.
So for me to get pass-through video that would accurately replicate how I'm looking through my glasses for proprioception to be able to touch the things on my desk, they would have to both be dead center in the middle where my eyes are, right? And they would have to be set so close that I didn't notice the difference between the distance from my pupils and where they actually are in the physical world. And that's just never going to happen. Like, you couldn't put a camera, even if it was completely transparent, on even my glasses. That would maybe be close enough for me to be like, well, that's close enough that it doesn't bother me that when I see my hand reaching out, that it's not quite where my brain thinks it's going to be, right? But so you've got this thickness problem of there's a screen and there's cameras and then there's lenses, right? That you all have to have, no matter how thin you get it, it's still not going to be as thin as a pair of glasses, right? So the whole idea of, like, could you do it from a Titanfall perspective of inside of a helmet, there's a rendered view of the front of, like how they did the front of the canopies in Titanfall with the cameras? Well, that works because if I see the proprioception of my robot arms on a screen out there, close enough, right? Like, the total distance difference to my brain is like, I'm still controlling a robot arm. It's not me touching something in space. So, like, I just don't think it's going to work like on a helmet or in glasses. But to answer your AR thing, like, why is everybody tripling down on AR from a corporate perspective? I used to think it was because it was always they're chasing the new hotness, and it was like VR was hot and then AR was the new hotness. And I think I've come to realize as a developer, it's form factor, like social appeal of consumers, and it's the actual processing power of AR is so much lighter than VR, because instead of having to render an entire world in my view frustum in 3D, I only have to render an object or two or an arrow or one sign, and your phone can handle that. Like, no matter how more advanced the phone gets, VR is always going to advance further ahead, right? Like, and so even if you look at it from an Oculus Quest to an iPhone, you're going to run the battery down on the Oculus Quest way faster than you are just using an iPhone to look at a little couple of AR things, right? Because it's constantly rendering a 3D world the entire time on the Oculus, even though it's relatively the same chipset and relatively the same battery size, right? It's just VR is murder on battery life and on your, the chips running. So for Apple to triple down on AR, it makes sense, and even Google, because they make the chipset that can run AR easily. They're already embedded in that market of hardware that can easily run it. And to the earlier point, it's appealing to consumers, right? Seeing people in their living room, even looking like they're having a great time, even superimposed over the virtual world, slicing blocks in Beat Saber, right? It looks amazing, but it's still harder for an average consumer to look at that and identify with it than it is for them to see somebody wearing a pair of glasses and going, the Starbucks is right over there. Like, it's like that just clicks with people to go, yeah, that's how I live my life. I wear my glasses, and they're saying these glasses will work, but at a point where, the bed and breakfast is that I need to get to, right? Like, for those companies, I see why they're absolutely tripling down on AR versus VR. And it's because it sells their hardware. And even, I'm sorry to keep bogarting, but to go back to like Ben's old point about Valve isn't interested in making money in VR, bullshit. They made Half-Life Alyx to sell index hardware. You can only buy this on Steam.
True.
It's an exclusive title. The only way
$60 game with
play...
a $1,000 headset.
Yes. They did it to sell this. The only way you can play Alyx with the absolute intended experience is on this hardware with those controllers. Is it great on other hardware? Yes. It's fantastic. It is an incredible VR experience no matter what you're playing it on, but they did it to move this. And this costs a fortune, right? Like, if, like, look, I love those guys. This isn't a criticism of them, but they're in it to make money. They know what they're doing. They're selling hardware. So, and that's why I used it as to wrap this up is Apple does it, Google does it, AR, they're selling hardware. That's what they want to do because they know the hardware can run it.
Why did Apple acquire NextVR?
The tech, whatever NextVR was doing, I'm not familiar enough with them.
They broadcast live sports to, I think it was Gear VR headsets at the time. But they would plop down like a stereoscopic camera at the sideline of a sporting event. You could watch it.
I have a feeling it was. I'm just saying this absolute spaghetti at the wall guess. I have a feeling it was less for that literal thing, and they saw the patent on how they're streaming that much video live.
Sure.
And performantly, and they wanted that.
Yeah, okay. And probably the talent and experience of the company. It's not easy to find people who are really understand VR and AR development. Like if you haven't already worked in it and you're like, well, I make games, so I'll be able to make a VR game. Like that's not really the experience people are looking for if you haven't directly worked inside this stuff. So yeah, tech and talent, I think more so than that specific use case. Steve.
Yep.
I have a theory. Have you ever watched Storage Wars? A
little bit, yes.
The guy who would always try to one-up the guy at the last second to make them pay more. I feel like Apple is that company whenever there's a bid going on. And there might have been like Facebook or someone else on the other side of that bidding, and they were like, $1 more than Facebook. And they're like, sold. They're like, crap. It's like how they acquired Beats. I don't think they were trying to acquire Beats. I think it was an accident.
Oops.
Because I spent $3 billion on a headphone company. But yeah, it's... When I see Apple make moves like that, I'm like, huh. And deep down, there's a news story that broke this week. I figured we could talk about it because it's very, it's valid to talk about this on a VR panel. Facebook has started implementing ads in headsets for different games and experiences. And that makes me want a viable competitor to Quest more than ever right now.
Yeah.
Everybody does.
Can we talk about how this week might sum up just the worst thing to ever I don't know. Facebook acquiring Oculus. When it happened, I sat there screaming at my TV for a good 30 minutes, just saying no. And this is why. 5 years later, here we are. After multiple people at Oculus said this would never happen. Multiple people at Oculus said you never need a Facebook account to use a VR headset.
Yep.
And here we are. They've gone back on everything they ever said they would do. I guess the question is how bad of shape is VR that Facebook is the leader in this space? How bad is this going to get?
I'm not so concerned with who is the leader, but the fact that there's pretty much one right now in standalone land is a problem, right? We have a lot of choices on PC VR, which is awesome, but standalone is growing really fast. Facebook is doubling down and betting everything that is the future and where the mass market for VR is going to come from. And yeah, we need a competitor so that if you don't like what Facebook is doing, there's a reasonable option for you to play similar content in the standalone form factor, and it just doesn't exist yet. The companies that were most, equipped to do that sort of fumbled early on, like Google with Daydream. They actually put out pretty much the first like consumer available standalone VR headset. It just had some quirks and weirdness to it that made it not, it wasn't the complete package. And then they're like, oops, well, I guess standalone's a dead end. And then Facebook comes along with Quest, and they're just selling these things like crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need that competitor. We need somebody to really be offering an alternative so that consumers are getting good choices, and one company's decisions don't just get to be what everyone has to deal with.
Yeah, no, I'm frustrated by it because I really enjoy standalone VR. Obviously, if I want that high fidelity experience, I'm going to play a game on my Index, and we have a VR room here at the office for that. But at home, I have my original Quest version 1, and it's basically like a dedicated Beat Saber machine. But like,
Yeah.
And it's really good at that. Like there's certain games that I really think that Quest just is a better experience, and it bums me out that there is there's literally no competition in that space right now, and that's super troubling. I kind of I want to shift to the future of VR, because the reason I have covered it so intensely since I bought Shacknews, and it's weird. Like when I acquired Shacknews, like DK2 was just kind of getting started, so it was like one of those things we were kind of on the ground floor covering VR in the new era of it. I think it can have a huge effect on society in the long run. I think that there is a such thing as addictive experiences in VR. I think that there are psychological effects of long-term use of VR, and I think that there are things that I've seen in Japan specifically that could really affect how society changes. I just want to put this out to the entire panel. Does VR have the ability to change society? And is it going to be for good or bad?
It's a deep question.
We can start with Rosie.
Yeah, it's a deep question. I've noticed firsthand the immersive potency of virtual reality experiences just from painting artworks, and then suddenly when I look back at that piece that I drew, like say if it was a week ago or something, I'm taken back to what music was on at the same time that I was painting that, what clothes I was wearing, it's like things embed more in the experience, and it attaches more into my brain, which then sometimes I can think of, like if I take my Quest on holiday and do some doodle sketches, then I'm instantly taken back to my holiday. So it embeds my memories almost. My sketches can become like little storybooks, but more so life moments, which is really, really surreal for me to experience as an artist, because I've never had that with any sort of painting, like real or traditional painting that I've ever created. So that is when if we consider like how we can just change our perspective, change our point of views, and put us into other people's shoes and stuff, and experience things from a completely different lens to what we're used to. It can have the ability to change who we are, in that sort of sense of things, and therefore it could change, society. I mean, I know for a fact that VR has changed my workflow, changed my career, and even industries right now. So yeah, I really do feel it will be changing society. Don't know about the good or bad question yet. That's see how far we get down the line to Ready Player One.
Well, it's like any tool, right? And any tool. I always use this because my mother hates the internet, right? She's like, I don't want to use the internet. Internet's the devil, whatever. I'm like, Mom, do you hate hammers? Because you can build a house with a hammer, you can hit someone in the head with the hammer. It's not the hammer's fault, right? VR to me is just like VR HMDs are that tool, and it's up to the makers of content and the users of those platforms to try to curate this in the best way possible, because I do fear that we could be headed in a very, we're already as a society becoming more isolated, and I think VR can help someone stay isolated, right? Because you can go places without actually leaving your house. And going back to what you're saying, like, it does tap into your imagination in a way that I don't think traditional media does, and that does. I don't know if there's been enough research done on how it affects your memories, but it does. Like, I can just from my own experience.
Yeah. So if I can jump in real quick, we've been doing, I've been doing a little bit of enterprise work with VR and stuff, and the research has shown, not my research, but like white papers that other, like universities have published and everything. You can go read the data out there. You see at least 30% or higher better uptick in memory of learning when you train in VR versus watching videos or any other non-interactive form. Like, obviously in-person training is the best training, right? But that doesn't scale, right? And B, you get into weird situations where, like, I had heard about this, I'd never worked on it, and then, so I'm not under NDA, so I can talk about it, that the oil companies, and like, fuck oil companies, but the point is that the oil companies out in Texas that drill, maintaining one of those drills is dangerous work.
Yeah.
It's actually physically dangerous for the person who has to go work on it and maintain it. And it costs them a ton of money. They don't have spare drills sitting around for people to train on, right? So, like, how do you train somebody on this thing that A, is going to be dangerous for them to train on, and B, costs you money to turn off because it's not drilling oil anymore, right? If they make another one, they want it out drilling oil. They don't want it sitting there ready for training. That's right. It's not the bottom line. And so they turned to VR and they were like, wait, we can have somebody actually work on a, it looks just like, as real as you can, real world oil rig. It all operates the same way. You get the same kind of handsy hand interaction to turn the dials and unscrew something and open this panel and pull these wires, right? Like, if the whole thing can be simulated in VR, you've now trained somebody how to work in a dangerous, hazardous work environment without ever, A, putting their life in physical danger, and B, in the end, it was more effective training than any other form of training other than the live training that's too expensive and too risky for you to do in the first place, right? So it absolutely, trying to back up Rosie's point, that that's why you maintain these memories. It's fooling your brain into thinking you're actually doing the real thing, even though you know it's a facsimile, right? And so your brain's creating better memory of the activity that you were doing, whether it was fun or art or gaming or, right, educational learning, work, training experiences. So like, VR has this huge potential, and it's why I wanted to get into it back in 2016. Everybody has that, I did my first moment in VR and I lost an hour to it, and I thought it was 15 minutes, right? And you come out of it and you're like, holy God, I need more of this in my life. And part of forming my own company was A, so I didn't have to work on mobile apps anymore, and B, I knew that Oculus and Valve were handing out free HMDs to people who were working in it, who could show that they could do successful work. And I was like, why wouldn't I do this, right? If I want to be in it more. So it's changed my life. I think it changes everybody's life for the better. But I am terrified of, if it's only Facebook and it's only Oculus in the end, that's not good.
No.
That's not good for anybody. They're tracking you, they're advertising to you, and it's like, that I don't think anybody wants.
They can control the content that's in VR as a whole, and they can control what's available there, and and God, they can ruin the whole medium with ads. Because I would gladly pay $100 for a VR app instead of seeing a single Facebook display ad in VR. Like, if that was an option, I'll pay you $100, devs. Just please don't show me any Facebook ads. I don't want. Like, VR was the sanctuary away from things, like, it was an escape place, right? And then for them to inject ads for Travelocity into, like, a game, like, it makes me sick. Like, I don't want to see that. I want to talk about something that's kind of, it's something I saw in Japan, and it made me think. There are VR soap lands in Japan. Are literally creepy places that you go you put on a VR headset, and there's an experience there where it's essentially like a VR sex work experience. And I saw that, and I was like, this could be the downfall of society. That we're going to create, for lonely people out there, some way for them to engage. What was that movie? It's not iRobot. There was some, I don't know. It's like one of those, virtual. What was that, Blake?
Was it the movie where everyone has like a surrogate body, like Bruce Willis was in it and stuff like that?
Basically, something like that. It's just I see this like dark path of VR that we could go down, especially if there's only companies out there that like are just about monetizing us. I'm troubled by that, and I do think that there is like a psychological addiction to some of that stuff that could happen, because VR is so much different than like a video game. I know that there's a lot that's similar between the two platforms, but to Rosie's point, where you really feel something when you're in VR, that I think people's emotions can be played with by talented developers, right? Where they feel like, oh, my VR waifu really loves me, and in reality, it's just a program. I think that we could go down a very scary path, or at the same time, to Steve's point, there's like, I remember this, I'm sure, Ben, you might have been at CES that year. There was like this HTC Vive demo where you put on like a fireman's jacket and there was like a fire hose, and like you were literally, when you're in the headset, you were in a kitchen and it was on fire, and it was training for that. And the jacket got warmer as the heat intensified and stuff. So like, there's like this yin and yang. When I look at VR, like there's two paths we can go down, and one is like, it's going to be great for productivity. It's going to be like most technology, as Steve's point, it helps increase efficiency. But then there's like this very dark path that we can go down. And I feel like we don't know which way we're going yet. I don't know if you want to speak to that, Ben.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, it is easier for some reason to imagine sort of dystopic scenarios for any technology. I don't know if it's a morbid curiosity of humans, or just we're prone to it because we see so many dystopic sci-fi, films, and those ideas are there, your Black Mirrors and such. Mm-hmm. But I don't think the reality is ever as extreme as the pure dystopia or the pure utopia, right? It's usually in a weird, as we are today with the technologies that we have, that if you look around your room, somebody at some point said, XYZ is going to be the downfall of society. We're still here. The world's probably a better place on average for the most people. And I don't think VR, is going to be inherently different as far as whether it's, good or evil. Granted, it is different in the sense that, a smartphone does stuff for you. A screen displays what you want it to display. In VR, the goal of the technology is to fundamentally convince you that you are in a different reality, right? Today, it's very rudimentary, but it's only going to get better to the point that, and I really believe this, to the point that in the far future, probably after I'm dead, it will be indiscernible when you put on whatever or connect to whatever. It will be indiscernible from real life. I think the technology will get there. Whether it's 100 years out or 1,000 years out, I don't know. But I think that's the trajectory. So what we're looking at really is VR. It's a reality machine. And so, you could do anything with a reality machine, right? So you do have to ask yourself who ultimately controls what is shown on that reality machine. The less and less that gets away from the individual who gets to choose exactly what they're seeing, and the more it goes into the hands of somebody else who has some other motive for what reality you get to see and experience and how it works. That is probably worse if it, rather than keeping it in the hands of the individual. So trying to figure out, who the platform players are, and, having enough options and choices that consumers can kind of have a fair shot at getting to see and do what they want to do rather than what somebody else wants them to do, I think is an important discussion.
Yeah, and I think VR is like a great escape mechanism, right? And I know, Rosie, you express yourself through art in VR. Yeah. And it's like a happy place to go. Like when you're in Tilt Brush, like it's like you're free, you can do whatever you want there. I think that like that aspect of VR is super important, and the more agency that the user has, the better VR will be. once I go back to the multi-billion-dollar companies running the medium right now, once they start limiting that or start telling you this is what you're going to do, I think that's when I get concerned. And I mean, we see it on the App Store, right? Apple curates their platform, right? And early on in VR, it really felt like the Wild West, where you could do anything in VR. I worry that self-expression may be limited on the platform, and that might hurt it going forward. But I am super excited every time I see like a new creative thing in VR, because to me, like that, you had to have tilt brush. VR needed tilt brush. VR needed Oculus Medium so badly, because before that, it was, no offense to Steve, it was a bunch of gun games, and a bunch of wave-based gun games, and that wasn't going to cut it. But yeah, I do think that tilt brush specifically kind of opened the door for a whole other kind of VR experience, and I think that's like, I kind of wanted to highlight both sides of it. Like, I'm not ascribing to the position that we're going to be in a dystopian future, but I mean, there's overwhelming evidence that things aren't going incredibly well on Earth. But so I'm looking forward to that next thing that taps into the same feeling that Tilt Brush and Medium did. Because I'm sure there is something out there. We just haven't seen it yet.
I think there's also one thing you don't mention. While there is the chance of like emotional disassociation and stuff like that, there's also a lot of promising. I think there's a lot of things that could help people from a medical perspective with virtual reality, and I think that that's going to be a part of it in the future. But we do have to start wrapping things up, as we have a very special Shacknews dump episode planned for you very, very shortly.
Thanks. I just want to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. You know how these live streams can go. But we wanted to give VR a spotlight. I think day 3 of E5, what better time to do that? So I guess the state of VR is strong. Can we agree with that?
Yeah.
It's not going anywhere.
Okay.
I think I think it's still early, man. I think VR has a long timeline to go.
And to Ben's point, 100 years from now, imagine what a VR HMD does.
We have to, because
we're all going to be dead. But imagine,
you're going to be dead.
I'm going to be in one of those Junipero Serra places. That's from the one happy episode of Black Mirror.
Before we go, Ben, where can people find out more about you besides Road to VR? Like, where can they follow you on social and all that good stuff?
Twitter, that's at Benz145, BENZ 145. I'll be ranting about all sorts of VR AR stuff. Come and say hi.
Awesome. And of course, roadtovr.com.
Yep.
If Shacknews screwed up on not covering some VR stuff, Road to VR has us covered, and we appreciate everything you guys do over there.
Thanks for having me too.
Yeah, no problem. Rosie, where can people find you and see your stuff?
Twitter again is where I spend most of my time. VR_Rosie, and same with Instagram and any of those social media networks. And rosiesummers.com if you want to drop me a message.
Awesome. Steve, what are you doing? What are you up to?
I just live on Twitter. Just at Gameism on Twitter.
And that used to be a website, right?
It's still a website. I still pay for it. Just be careful. I haven't touched it in forever, and I think some hackers got in and installed some weird shit in my ads.
Okay, so don't go to Gameism.
Probably don't. I don't. There's nothing new there. Like, it's all over 10 years old. I just leave it up because every time I threaten to close it, people are like, "But I love those articles," and I'm like, all right.
And in chat, Exit Lava is commenting on both your backgrounds, Rosie and Steve. She appreciates the RGB and whatever. I don't know what you're in right now, Steve, but it looks amazing. But yeah, so follow all these folks. they're gonna be tweeting about all sorts of stuff. And Rosie, do you stream or anything, or is
Not yet, but
Okay.
it's something I'm looking at getting into soon. But I do a lot of virtual performances, which are streamed online.
Awesome?
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we love VR here. We hope we can do this again. And once again, thanks everyone for taking the time out to talk to us here at
Thank you.
Shacknews E5.